Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Faiz Ahmed, and uh, this is Bangladesh Unfiltered. And the last time I did a podcast was months ago, I think 8 or 9 months ago. And my previous guest was Professor Nazmul Kalimullhah, who was detained and imprisoned right after the podcast I had with him, I think 10 days after that. And his imprisonment inspired me to, fight for the detained journalists and the pro-independence voices in Bangladesh. So therefore, I have a very special guest with me today. I have the former EU MP, Mr. Paulo Casaca, and he's also the founder of the South Asian Democratic Forum. Uh, and Paulo, I would like to welcome you to my show today. And just wanted to get started and ask you how are you today?
Ahmed, thank you very much for the invitation. Yeah, rest assured, I'm not in Bangladesh. Right now, at least up to now, rules are not the same in Europe that there are in Bangladesh, so I can speak freely.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't surprise me what you are telling me about your latest guest. It is Bangladesh since 2004 is brutal dictatorship imposed by the West,
Exactly.
which is what makes it more puzzling and more disturbing for a lot of people, for myself. Um, but yeah,
Yeah. So
uh,
my first question was to you was what first drew your attention to a country like Bangladesh, which, not a whole lot of Western politicians pay attention to. Yeah.
well, actually, I think it's you should not get any illusion, But why the people who know or got emotionally involved with Bangladesh, like myself when I was a kid, was before of because of George Harrison
Right.
and Joan
Conquer.
Baez, they popularized the cause,
Yeah.
uh, and that's why I know Bangladesh and why I got to be, very interested. I mean, otherwise, I am Portuguese. I've been an academic part of my life, an economist. I published in economics, actually, very also, a very skeptical point of view on the official doctrines. And I've been in politics in the Azores, the region where I lived
Yeah.
most of my life, or at least of my adult life, while in Portugal as a country and in the European Union. I was also briefly a diplomat in Brussels.
Okay.
Um, and, India was really my uh, what attracted me most when I was a politician, because something I think I've been saying for ages is that India is, in my opinion, is going obviously to be the, it's a matter of time, it's going to be the leader of the democratic, free world, open society. That's my perception for a very long time. It's a matter of time, might go, back and forth, but that's what I think. Things, the world is centering in Asia, in the Indo-Pacific, as it is now the good vocabulary, although Indo-Pacific is not very meaningful as a as a concept. But anyway, it's moving towards Asia, so it's there that most of the things will happen. And China is the autocratic model, the autocratic power, and India is the contrary, is the democratic power. With a lot of zigzags, but that's what I do believe. So, South Asia Democratic Forum became a project after I finished the European Parliament. After I actually, I got in breaking. It's more than the party. It's much more than that. Things that you are now starting to understand. The I did not understand at the time, that the Islamist lobbies could
Mhm.
be so strong. Well, the Iranian one, for instance, now people are start looking at it. It has been for ages, for decades, and I was very much involved in the Iranian issue. Well, that's another story. I wrote actually a book about that, because people were asking me, "Oh, why did you get so much involved in Iran?" They explain, in an autobiographic book I published 20 years ago. But actually, India was always a big reference. So when I finished my terms and I understood, I had to make a living by myself, and I had no future in Portugal,
Right.
and I migrated, as a matter of fact, to Brussels, to become a citizen. SADF became a project, and so I got involved in SADF as a think tank that would be geared to study South Asia on a European perspective. Since this is all true in our day, but it was also true 15 years ago, uh, South Asia is the biggest region in the world, but it's very much ignored. Ignorance is the number one thing that is prevailing regarding what Europe or the United States think about South Asia. It's ignorance. Ignorance is the most important issue. People people might have know more about Africa than they actually know about South Asia. So
Right.
it's very much ignored. And of course, Bangladesh was something that I was really very curious. And the first work we did was on Bangladesh, as a matter of fact, we were commissioned to do that, to make a survey how Bangladesh would see regional integration. And so I got very much. I was very very interested. So I that's the country I visited the most, more than India, more than all the others. I got there, and the more I got there, the more I got fascinated
You got
from the
fascinated.
human point of view.
Yeah.
And of course, I try to understand a bit retrospectively all these issues related to the 71 genocides and the Western position. And this was, and it still is, one of the biggest intellectual challenges, because how comes that these West, and it is true for Europe, it's true for the United States, it's true for the Democrats of Biden, it's true for Trump. Trump that presents himself as the hero of freedom, and that he opposed dictatorship in Venezuela, in Cuba, Iran. Then he promotes a dictatorship that it's not substantially better, and the one of all of the three I just named, for instance, all comes. It's really a big issue.
Moving forward, I think you mentioned about the mentioned about the Islamist lobbyists. So Bangladesh became independent in the 1970s, and as a progressive and secular country, which is like, enshrined in our constitution. So, but over the years, every few years I visit, the social fabric keeps changing. Like you'll see more, Islamic attire, more burqa and all that. So, do you believe the Islamist lobbyists they had a huge role to play regarding changing the social fabric and mindset of ordinary Bangladeshis?
I think that they were absolutely crucial.
Yeah,
I think it's not only Bangladesh, it's the whole of the West, because people believe that well, Kissinger is the symbol of Western diplomacy,
right.
which is a tremendous error. What you can call the West, or it's something that is very difficult to define and to start with, because I think that the most Western country nowadays it's actually Japan.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it happens to be the most eastern from the geographic point of view. So starting with this, okay, it's a very complex and very tricky concept to use. But anyway, what you call the West, the liberal
Yeah,
democratic thing that started somewhere with the American Revolution, with English parliamentarian liberalism, French Revolution is less credible, but never mind. Whatever this thing is, there is has been always, the two traditions. I mean, the tradition that is really innovative is Adam Smith, the optimists. But you had as well, at nearly, at the same time, you had Malthus that had a pessimist tradition where, you what I gain is what you lose. Things are limited, and you see this tradition in the geopolitics construction that, among various others, Mr. Kissinger embodied. And there was this perspective. Actually, Kissinger did not invent it. I mean, Churchill actually had it as well, that looking at the South Asia and saying, well, the Soviet Union wants to get to the warm seas. That's the language of the times, of the 1940s, late 1940s. So you have this Indira Gandhi, the not Indira Gandhi, sorry, is her father, Gandhi is a very suspicious person. They did not really understand much of his doctrine, but they suspected it to be a bit of a pro-communist, whatever. So you have to block the Soviet Union from reaching the war waters. How do you do it? Well, with a barrier. Afghanistan was also not enough, so you make a Muslim state. Okay, Pakistan from west and east. Well, in the middle, you had Nepal. Nepal is a bit of a creation of the British colonialism.
right.
Uh, a long story, but they thought they could count with Nepal as well. And then you have, you have the chicken's neck, and you have a little more, but that's mountainous Tibet. And actually, when they devised this policy, the communists had not yet won China, although they thought that they would, and from these times onwards, they didn't change. They have been thinking like that, and this sort of a perspective that is, I mean, geopolitics is important, and I'm not saying that I say we have to be always optimist and never pessimist. No. Okay, we must be realists, sometimes one thing and sometimes the other. But this perspective that was already ridiculous at the time, I mean, survived all reality. Because I find it funny that Kissinger is supposed to be the symbol of the realist school of diplomacy in the United States. He is completely unrealistic. He has been completely out of touch with reality. And by the way, I mean, he should be appreciated by his deeds. I mean, he everything he preached was a catastrophe. Everything without an exception. He did not get one right. The genocide of Bangladesh is the case in point, but it's not the only one. You look whatever, he didn't get one right. He is the symbol of everything that went wrong in the United States.
Definitely.
Um,
Yeah.
but this image was staged, even when it was shaken, of course, in September 11, because these big friends, these great guys that were coming to the receptions of the oil big guys in Texas, namely the the family of the presidents
Right.
of the Republic. Sorry.
Yeah, I just said, yeah, correct. Yep.
They actually were connected. in many ways to the hijackers of September 11. Yeah, and of course, Bin Laden was sheltered by Pakistan for ages. All of that is so obvious. But uh, this mindset uh, goes on
Definitely, yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it is made of ignorance. It's made of conservative reactionary inertia, and it's made of lobbying because from the 1970s onwards, the biggest source of money to buy whomever, in the political and not only political, the press, the academia, the NGOs. It's the oil that comes from the Muslim states around the Gulf. Fundamentally, that's what is the source of it. So they have been. I mean, what's the sense of siding with Pakistan against Bangladesh in 71? There was no sense. I mean, there was this theory of the communists and
Exactly.
the it's make no sense. But if it did not make sense in 71, in 2024, it's even more absurd. But that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. The very same thing, the very same actors. It was obviously the United States deep states, um, directly and indirectly through the European institutions that are completely on regarding the external action service and its relation to Bangladesh, um, completely on the hands of the United States directly or the United Kingdom. That makes no difference on this particular issue. That really were lobbying all the time for the Islamists, and they were the ones. Of course, there was. I mean, and we are getting already, this issue of the color revolution.
Right. Speaking of, color revolution, so Bangladesh always had a very imperfect democracy after the assassination of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who was he was, he was the founding father of Bangladesh. He was someone who wanted to work with all countries. He didn't want to like single out Soviet Union or just the United States. He had a foreign policy called friendship to everyone but malice to none. And unfortunately, I think, the United States could not work with him because of his ideology. And as a result, we had a series of military dictators, starting from Zia Rahman to President Eshad. So they were all blessed by the United States and the West. And ever since then, the foundation was very patchy when it comes to maintaining democratic frameworks. Um, and probably the last free and fair election we had was in 2008 when all parties did participate. But afterwards, Sheikh Hasina was someone who wanted to like maintain the internal security of Bangladesh, sometimes at the cost of democracy. And yeah, and as a result, we have seen like exponential economic growth in Bangladesh, although at the expense of democracy for the last 16 years, about 6% GDP on average, and which has slashed 3% in 2024. So, do you believe that, you know, uh, what the country was like growing so rapidly? So, what intention did the external actors had towards her downfall? Like, why did they not want her and prefer someone else?
Yeah, that's a question I've been asking myself for years, and I've been reasoning and a lot about it. One has to say that the best years of Bangladesh, in my opinion, are obviously the ones of these 15 years of Sheikh Hasina from 2009. For me, it's only if you really want to distort reality can you discuss it, because otherwise it's quite obvious even from the point of view of the democratic reality. That was far from a good one, of course, um, and was not a good one, and for a variety of reasons. well, the most important of them is that the democratic culture, I mean, real democratic elections where you would see change of power peacefully through elections, as you said, other than 2008, probably there was never happened. The democracy was quite imperfect, although you have much worse, around the world. I mean, it's not a question of saying or putting. I mean, the idea of putting Bangladesh in the same league as autocratic countries is actually, I think, erroneous. It is not. Bangladesh of Sheikh Hasina was not Cuba, was not Venezuela, was not, North Korea or whatever. No, it was within the democratic world, but with a lot of points. And of course, I mean, and then it was not perfect. Could Sheikh Hasina have done something different? It's speculation. I do not know. But the reality was that she compromised with the military and the Islamist institutions,
She did. Yeah.
both of them,
Yeah.
with the military to make combat the terrorism. She more or less gave, free, free passage, green light to whatever the security establishment decided to do to quell terrorism. And of course, there were human rights violations, clearly.
Absolutely. Mhm.
And not only against terrorists, because once you have a power that is not really under control, it is bound um, to go over what it should be doing. That's unquestionable. But here the issue is not that she created. A lot of the things I've been seeing in the propaganda paid by these deep state machine, the Soros, and so on, are ridiculous. Like she would have created, the bodies, the repression bodies in Bangladesh. She did not create. I mean, they were existing before
They
her.
were existing. Yeah. It
Yes,
already existed in the system. Yeah.
all existed. She just adapted to it. What I can wonder, well, if she would say, I'm going to confront them, well, most likely she would not have lasted many months. And we had, she was barely in power when there was an attempt of coup against her, a military attempt. So, so could she have done otherwise? Possibly she couldn't. Regarding Islamism, well, um, I think that she went further than she should have done because she got convinced that if she would single out the Jamaati Islam big wigs that were actually at the hands on the genocide
Right.
and repress them, everything would go okay. She never thought about, Islamism as an ideology to have been behind the genocide and to have to confront the this ideology. And what you are saying to me is exactly what I saw as well. The first time I was in Bangladesh was in 2012. Last time 2024, and it was. I mean, the most obvious symbol of things changing was the women dressing, as always.
Exactly.
you you used to see in 2012 there were saris everywhere. In
Hmm.
2024, I went to places, especially the industrial belt of Dhaka, where it was you felt like you were in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
The niqabs and well, not necessarily burqas, but nearly. It was horrendous. Yeah. So, and this tells a lot. So, uh, and she thought that they could get them in her favor by appeasing them. Both the Islamists and the military. 2024 showed she could not. They went against her. But that's the internal side of the issue. the big problem, and I'm saying this, but um, uh, I'm not sure that there was an alternative. I'm not sure. It's very easy when things happen. You just look backwards and say, "Well, sure, okay." A very different thing is to medicine. So I'm not lecturing Sheikh Hasina. I'm not saying that she was not a fantastic leader, which I think she was, and I'm not expecting nothing from her. But she was a fantastic leader, and she deserves all our praise. Point. Okay. But now for the West, what happened? Well, a lot of things happen. Well, ignorance is fundamental. The this mindset that we did it already in '71. That's the way we see things. These are our guys. The others are there. But most importantly, the Qatari financial muscle. That was the most important because the moment that there was execution of prominent Jamaati Islam leaders, that means the
Yeah.
same thing as Muslim Brotherhood. That
Yeah.
means the same thing as the Muslim International, Islamist International. Qatar and all the Islamism said, we are going to depose him. That's it. And so they invested heavily on a campaign on lobbying through the press, through NGOs, and directly through the diplomats and so on and so on and so on to go against Sheikh Hasina. And I saw that in Brussels. For me, it was so obvious. Who did not want to see? I mean, I remember I did have the occasion meeting just it was before the 2024 election. The minister of foreign affairs in August that before was the minister of information, and I had a meeting with him head to head, and I told him, "Listen, there is a Western sponsored coup in preparation to depose your government."
Hmm.
That was in 2023. I don't remember. Um, he didn't believe me. Uh, but for me, it was so obvious. Why? Because, I can read things that I can read body language. I can read a lot of things that sometimes people do not know how to read. But I can. I mean, I've been there in the European Parliament a lot of times, and some of the times, the so-called Qatar Gate. What is the essential part of the Qatar Gate? Books, hundreds of pages, books that were sponsored by an NGO that made 100% part of the Soros machine, and that was introduced into the European Parliament think tank, the subcommittee for human rights, like it would be, a source of dogma. And these books, you just have to read them. They are so absolutely clear, after what you might imagine, which is, of course, Israel, Israel, the big, the biggest Satan. But after Israel, you have Bangladesh, and that Sheikh Hasina did not understand. She did not. When I was in 2024 there and I was in a reception with her. I was put behind, a delegation of one of the terrorist groups, Palestinian terrorist groups, and I think, well, she didn't get it, And even, when the coup was happening, I was hearing gossips from the part of people connected with the Awami League. Oh, Israel. Israel had nothing to do with it. Would be on the opposite side of the equation. It's the Islamism. Uh, Islamism main enemies are Muslims. That's what we all have to understand, because the Westerns nobody understands this. But in the East, in Bangladesh and elsewhere, a lot of people don't understand this either. I think that Sharia Kabir, he did understand. He did understand. He was, I mean, I met him sometimes, in Europe, in Brussels. He came often to Brussels, and each time I spoke with him, on issues like Afghanistan, for instance, I mean, he was absolutely amazing. He did understand
You,
what I,
since you
yeah, go ahead.
mentioned, since you mentioned, I think Sharia law. So, this elections, I think it was like 3 or 4 months ago. Bangladesh was very close to having Jamaat Islami forming government and probably installing Sharia law. There was all kinds of very, disturbing rhetorics used by the Amir of Jamaat, regarding how women should be dressing or our women should be working for 4 or 5 hours a day. So there was all kinds of disturbing rhetorics. But even with the results of this election, we are seeing that there's this pattern that all the seats that Jamaat Islami won, it's within the border areas shared with India. So, how concerning do you think that is for for the region itself, for the security, since they have primarily taken control of the border areas with India? So, how do you perceive that?
No, I think that goes exactly within the geopolitical priorities of the Islamist international, and let me call it that way, because it's a bit difficult to say. People sometimes think, oh, it's the Muslim Brotherhood, an organization with people. It's not a Muslim Brotherhood. Oh, Jamaat, for instance, Jamaat Islam is much more important than the Muslim Brotherhood, by the way. People don't, nobody understands this. The people, there are a lot of people in France and the United Kingdom that sponsored things to put the Muslim Brotherhood in the terrorist list. It's a bit meaningless because the Jamaat is 20 times as powerful as the Muslim, but they don't get it. They don't know it. They don't want to know. Okay. But getting back to this, it's a bit, it's a bit difficult because it's not the Emir of Qatar that rules everything. It's certainly not the Muslim group. It's a sort of a very diffuse concertation of powers that you can call that I call the Islamist international, but where the financial muscle, the fundamental one is a Qatar one and their perspective that you can read everywhere. People like Bin Laden were more clear on this. It's this issue that first you start by recovering the areas that were Muslim, but that the Kafirs took control of. And among them, you have fundamentally three big areas. The most important of them is India. Second is the Balkans, and the third is the Iberian Peninsula. These three, are most important. And India is the most important of them all. So all of what happens in Bangladesh, there was, this. Of course, the issue of the sentencing to death of the Jamaat leaders was, the biggest crime that they could not, they could never forgive Sheikh Hasina for this. But other than this, the geopolitics is to get to control the whole of India, directly, indirectly, by these appeasing mechanisms, by trying to infiltrate as much the Congress party as they do through the Soros machine, or for many other ways. This is the strategy, and of course, it makes sense to give. I think that these elections that took place in this year in Bangladesh are totally ridiculous. I mean, that's no elections; it's nominations, and so they nominated um, the people, by the border of India, the Jamatis, the sort of war offensive. That's what it means, and I think that India understood it. Although
Yeah, you know,
sometimes, yeah,
what's very absurd is so obviously I think you do know that Sheikh Hasina has been sentenced to death like during the administration of Muhammad Yunus. And if you analyze a few years ago during the War Crimes Tribunal, so the very lawyer, which was uh, fighting for Jamaat. They were the defendants of Jamaat Islami back in 2013, I think. And this time, the same actors gave the verdict against Sheikh Hasina. So it clearly shows that this is political vengeance, you know? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a bit like you would have uh, mm, the culprits, the Nazi culprits, to become to become in charge of
Yeah.
justice, you
Of the
know,
Allied powers. Yeah.
for
Yeah. The
it's
Nazis
a
are, judging Allied powers now. Yeah. That's the,
it's a it's a it's a bit like that, you know. So this is I mean, this is a bit Orwell because you have seen a lot of dictatorial coups all over the world, where normally, I mean, the main argument is to bring stability or to end corruption. Okay, that's the normal thing, but I mean, it's the first time that the guys that have been condemned for the crime of genocide. They made a coup, and then they captured the old institutions that
yeah.
condemned them, and they put them exactly
That's what happened. Yeah. Exactly.
reverse.
Respond.
It's like you are reading George Orwell, the Ministry of Truth, the Ministry of Love. The Ministry, the Ministry of Truth is the ministry in charge of organizing lies. The Ministry of Love is the ministry of charge of torture. So it's a bit the same logic. It's a very Orwellian logic what you saw in in Bangladesh, and this was, this was covered by the whole of the West. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely terrible because where is George Harrison and John Baez? They are lacking very much now because mm, this has to be exposed. I think over 90% of the people don't get it. And nobody knows nothing about Bangladesh. It's the sixth most important country in the world, biggest, but nobody knows about it.
Nobody knows about it.
Uh, so there is a big effort to be done, of education and exposing those Western mechanisms that have been lying. It's very, very important. Expose them, be it the newspapers, these NGOs, whatever. Expose them. It's very, very important. And I think that you know, Sharia Kabir is very important because he's a leading intellectual. He has always been in the targets of the Islamists. He was already imprisoned by the BNP when the BNP was in power, but at the time, there was the pressure was sufficiently big to force the BNP, and namely from the European Parliament. One of these days I've been seeing the interventions of my former colleagues on Sharia Kabir and the answers of the commission, and you can see that the pressure was working. Now they just don't move. It's much worse now than it was 25 years ago. Unfortunately, that's the reality. But regarding India, uh, I think that they thought about putting Jamaat in power, but then there was a backdoor business with India. India said that was really a declaration of war, and India accepted the BNP. Was a bit but of course, the BNP, as we have seen, is really nothing substantially different from the Jamaat.
Right.
They have continued the same policies, and I think that I mean India, of course, is is no dupe and is able to understand better than I am what I'm saying. So I think that they will certainly recalibrate their policy. But I think that that was it. They made a business. They took India's claim that putting Jamaat in power would be a declaration of war, unacceptable, and there might even be a military option. I don't know that I don't know, but it would not surprise me. And then they had this deal. But of course, the all the Western tradition of Adam Smith tells a very simple thing: is that uh, trade development is mutually beneficial. So, what from the optimist point of view, and that's my point of view regarding Bangladesh, what is the strategic interest of Europe or of the United States in Bangladesh? Is that it develops, that it is free, that people, because development is, you cannot really separate it from freedom. I mean, the Islamism will kill it's very obvious, will kill all the economic dynamic of Bangladesh. And so the only way to uh, to fulfill the Western interests is to allow Bangladesh to be free. And of course, it cannot be free when the main political party, the Awami League, is not only illegalized, it's persecuted, its leaders are murdered everywhere, by in jail or in unofficial procedures. Not possible. So this is the big challenge, and I think that the real Western interests, not the one of those people that have some commission paid by some NGO, ultimately from Qatar or elsewhere, but the general interest of the West is to have democracy in Bangladesh. Very simple.
So moving on to like human rights right now. So, during the time of Sheikh Hasina, I'm not denying that there wasn't any human rights violation. There was. But, some Bangladeshis, they tend to argue that international media like let's say Al Jazeera, they highlighted abuses under the Awam League more aggressively than abuses happening right now, like during the tenure of Muhammad Yunus or right now under Tariq Rahman. Do you think that criticism is fair? That I think media like Al
Well, it's
Jazeera over
absolutely fair
exaggerate.
and
Yeah,
objective.
yeah,
And Al Jazeera is actually feeding the whole of the Western press. You could see that in Israel. There is a study I published. After a couple of weeks in the war of Gaza, it's like 22 of October, where there was a mistranslation from Al Jazeera Arabic to Al Jazeera English,
right.
and then all the Western press copied the mistranslation
Mm,
without ever quoting Al Jazeera, always quoting the Ministry of Health, which was Hamas. But in this case, it was not Hamas. No, no, it was not Hamas. It was Al Jazeera. And they all, I mean, Al Jazeera go to their website and they claim that they have been training tens of thousands of journalists in the last 20, 25 years. That's what they say. They have, it's a tremendous propaganda machine. They captured, how did they capture most of the BBC journalists? Offering them salaries that was three times higher. Well, very simple. And they got the cream of the BBC, and the rest of the BBC became, a bit the followers or the admirers of those of BBC that were now in Al Jazeera, and trying a bit. I mean, if I behave well, I might be promoted. Promoted being coming from BBC to Al Jazeera. So BBC is the most obvious case of control by Al Jazeera, but it's not the only one. It's everywhere. And I'm sure it also works in relation with the Soros machine, but it's independent. These networks are independent. When people think about, for instance, oh, how much Qatar invested in universities, they are not seeing what comes via via the quantum funds from the Cayman Islands, through these Soros NGOs. How much? And this is perhaps even more important than the money coming directly from Qatar. So the big problem of the West, as I see it, is the you can buy it. It's I was uh, I was reading a bit of the way that the Persians managed to win against one of the Greek generals. That's universal. They bought the allies, the Greek cities, that would for them not to support the Greek general. That's the way it goes. Nothing invented right now. It's a very old-fashioned weapon. But this goes on like nothing happened. This I wouldn't call it influence because it's much more than influence. Capture. They got it in their hands, and they start being their own agents, not influencing, much more than influence. All of this is happening, and nobody says a word about it. Regarding Russia, as it was already the KGB and so on, there is a lot, yes, a lot of reaction. But regarding the Islamist era, zero.
My next question is, ever since the fall of Sheikh Hasina, so the Bangladeshi passport has dropped drastically over the last 2 years. And we are seeing increasing complaints from students, entrepreneurs, industrialists, businessmen that they're no longer receiving any kind of visas for the European Union or the United States or Australia. So does this indicate like a collective, agreement between the Western countries that okay, we might have we might have screwed up on Bangladesh. We might have, made a bad decision because clearly they consider Bangladesh as a security threat right now. What do you feel about that?
Very, very good point. I mean, it shows that uh, that there is no foreign policy in the West. I mean, actually, you have security agencies that you know act by themselves and have their own sources of information, and they do what is obvious. The obvious thing is that Bangladesh is more and more a source of um, radicalism and terrorism for all over the world. But that doesn't touch the diplomacy.
Hmm,
Diplomacy continues. Diplomacy
right.
continues to sponsor the very same people that create all these problems. How is it possible? There is no. This is this is something that is not working in the Western world. It's a problem. It's not only the United States. It's exactly as you said very well. Australia, Canada, European Union, United Kingdom. Well, United Kingdom is perhaps the worst, the most, the one that went to levels unimagined. But how comes? I mean, it was very simple. You would have just the diplomat should have just make a phone call for his colleague of the security and say, "Well, what was the problem in the last 2 years?" And things would be sorted out, and the diplomats would obviously get to the conclusion that only a democratic regime in Bangladesh combating Islamism is um, what interests to all of us.
Moving on, like regarding the subjects of human rights. So, obviously, according to the Western powers, Bangladesh has a elected government right now, since the shift of the interim government of Muhammad Yunus. So, a lot of people expected that pro 1971 voices like Shahryar Kabir and a lot of pro Awamu League journalists will, receive fair due process, but unfortunately they remain in prison and they're not seeing any progress, and they continue to be mistreated. So what are some of the actions the European Union uh, want to take or they have taken? So what are your thoughts on that?
No, we have been, SADF has been pressing very much the European Union on these issues. Sharia Kabir is a case in point. And nothing happens. So they know very well what is the situation. But they really think that to keep the Islamists is a good idea. It defies all the logic and all the common sense. And but I think that we are in an open society, and the struggle has to be done uh, everywhere. With the press, because mostly these diplomats, they get their cover on the press, the press that just reproduces Al Jazeera. If these cases, Sharia Kabir would be in the front page of the Western press, I can assure you that everything would be different. They would Things would start to change. But no, this the problem is exactly that the Qataris and this Islamist network managed to infiltrate everything: the press, the academia, NGOs, and the state. They didn't buy everybody, and you can always still speak freely. And that's what the last and most decisive weapon. But one has to use it. One has to say, you are lying. You are telling that this is a democracy. There is no democracy. This was a staged act where opposition was prohibited from participating, where there is no transparency on the voting procedures, the voting counting. There is no transparency on the results. They are not trustworthy. There is no democracy. There is no freedom. Journalists are persecuted. Oppositionists are killed in the streets, are killed in the prisons. There are tens of thousands of invented criminal proceedings against whoever is seen as an obstacle for the power in place. So there is no democracy whatsoever. There is a terrible dictatorship, and these are the facts. And go for the facts, go everywhere, every citizen, be Bangladeshi or not. That's our struggle, and that's what we have to stick for.
So my next question is on Professor Muhammad Yunus. So Muhammad Yunus, he took reins of the government, I think, in August 8th of 2024, and the average Bangladeshi had exceedingly high expectations from him. But over the last, 2.5 years, we have seen an increase in mob violence that we have never seen before. I don't think I have seen this scale of mob violence ever in Bangladesh. We have seen we're seeing right now like a measles crisis, and over 300 kids, I mean babies, infants, they have died, despite the fact that UNICEF already warned Muhammad Yunus that these kids should be vaccinated. Over and over again, they sent him a letter about 5 times, and he ignored, and he would rather, give that responsibility to his NGO friends, which never happened. They ended up being corrupt, and yeah, the money ended up in their pockets. That's what happened. So, do you feel that Muhammad Yunus has fulfilled his intention over the last 2 years, or you feel that he wanted to like stay in power as long as he could, but due to like the power of the people, he couldn't? What do you feel about that?
No, I never believed that he wanted to stay in power indefinitely. That was never my belief. And I participated in several discussions where I said that.
Yeah.
I did not have this feeling. And my feeling on him, and especially after scrutinizing sufficiently what he has been doing, he's a banker. He's just 100% a banker, and he is there only for the money. And of course, he got a lot of money during these couple of years, or 1 year and 8 months, or what was it? That was fair enough. Of course, he must ensure that his friends continue in command for his business not to interest not to be in jeopardy. But that's his agenda. And one has to keep in mind that um, all that happened in 2024 was already tried in 2006, 2007. I mean, he tried to make the party, the international community tried to impose him as the leader of Bangladesh. And just at the last moment, he stepped back because he thought, and probably was wise to do it, he thought that the conditions were not ripe yet. So he he waited for another 18 years. But for 18 years, he has been propelled by these deep states, by these machines, by these lobbying machines, as the future person to be in charge of Bangladesh and painted, and he was made to author. I don't know. He was. I don't know how many how many things he directed in the United Nations. He appeared everywhere. For women, so many women in this world, but yet to be responsible for women commission of whatever. But he was responsible for everything. He appeared everywhere. You go to his speeches, and of course he said absolutely nothing. You just try to translate his speeches into concrete things, and it's zero. That's exactly what the trend is. You need to make very flowery appearances with zero substances. That's what is trendy. And what happened did not surprise me at all. I think that he just put the Jamatis in charge. He just cared about his business. He got his bank, uh, you know, uh, getting good business and with good conditions and so on, and his friends and so on. So he couldn't care less. I mean, probably he did not even look at these letters on the missiles. Is there anything? Do I get 20% out of it? I don't get 20% out of it. Well, couldn't care less with it. I think this he has always been like that. That's his nature, and the fact that this information machine in the world is managed to paint a guy like him. I mean, the Nobel Prize. I went to the proceedings of the Nobel Prize. I mean, it's unbelievable. I've never seen something like that. Because you read the nomination procedure of him and the bank. Because it was a uh, they share the price, and you say, well, who wrote this does not have a single clue of what money has been in the world for thousands of years, and what money and lending is in the third world nowadays. It's the idea that he invented microcredit. It's so absurd. All of this is absurd, and it shows, a machine that is a very small machine. The circle that gets all together in once a year in Davos, and they know each other's, and they nominate them. All of them nominate the others of the club, and he was part of the club. Okay, so that's how he got there. But he was a banker, nothing more than a banker.
And moving on, so this is a very important question. So I just wanted to know your perception here. So, given we already know that Muhammad Yunus has all these deep state connections, what do you make out of United States like strategic interest towards Bangladesh? Do you think they want to see like a satellite Pakistani country and just to like counter China? Do you feel that that's a possibility? What's your theory?
Yeah, oh, yeah. I mean, um, it's make Bangladesh Pakistan again, MBPA. Instead of MAGA, it's MBPA. And of course, that we're starting with this issue of China. Um, Whoever has been looking at the reality knows that Pakistan is the number one ally of China at the world stage. And of
Right.
course, Bangladesh becoming a clone of Pakistan. Of course, it's the same thing. It's obviously against the strategic interests of the United States. It probably is not against the pockets of a lot of people that are in key positions in the United States machine that are profiting one way or the other. And, I can imagine, for instance, that I can imagine. Do you have any proof? And I'm not sure that things are like that, but I would not be surprised. Somebody like Mr. Trump. He has some, Iran is something that he doesn't buy because
Right.
it comes from a long time, and he actually did not like very much that they tried to kill him. It's something that he does not really appreciate. And as he said himself, it should not be very difficult to understand that a country where the leaders every Friday get together to say death to America, they probably are not friends of America. It should not be very difficult to get to this conclusion. But you could have a world of academics making the most unbelievable reasonings to demonstrate the opposite. Okay. Regarding Bangladesh, the issue is very simple. He couldn't care less. He doesn't know where it is.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
he doesn't know how it is. He couldn't care less. If there is a strong lobby, like a Qatari machine saying, well, Emir would be very pleased if you would just, take it easy with his Yunus and so on. Probably said yes, although he doesn't like Yunus. That was, I had some hopes on that. He doesn't
Yeah, a
like
little
Yunus.
bit of hopes. Yeah.
He doesn't like Yunus for a very simple reason because Yunus was one of the financial contributors to the campaign of Clinton against him. So, anyway, probably he was not at all financial contributor. It was a laundering machine working, but that's another story. Never
I
mind.
mean, I think it is my theory that the president, like, he sees Bangladesh through the lens of some American diplomats, like, John Denilowitz, Brent Christensen right now. So the way they see it, the president probably agrees with them. So I think that's where the probably the disconnection is. Who
Well,
knows?
I do not follow you completely because he doesn't trust. He showed that he distrusts most of the deep state machine.
Right.
But the problem, as I see it, is that he does not ignore the pressure and the lobby.
The pressure in the lobby.
Uh,
Yeah, definitely.
he never confronted the Emir of Qatar with nothing. Never. Even when Israel attacked Hamas leaders in Doha, he was going up front defending his big friend, the Emir of Qatar. The Emir of Qatar has more clout on Mr. Trump than whomever, and this is the problem. So if he Emir of Qatar says, forget about it, just leave it as it is. Don't make a fuss with Bangladesh because the machine is there. He just, one of the things that I found more interesting. There was a big article on the diplomatic moves of Trump administration. Oh, he dared to change. I don't know how many ambassadors that were, part of the machine, and his predecessors never did. Blah 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 blah. Okay, but nobody said what to me was obvious. How comes he didn't touch the ambassador in Bangladesh? How comes? That is the real surprising thing, because when he started, he said a lot of things because it was so obvious that the deep state was completely involved in the Bangladeshi coup. So he was going that direction. Something stopped him. And I think what stopped him was something like a word of the Emir of Qatar. Or if it was not that, it was something like that. Not because this gentleman you just mentioned, is an Islamist lobbyist, obvious.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we used to, we prior to President Trump, we mostly had presidents who denied the existence of deep state. But if you, I don't know if you followed the visit of Prime Minister Modi at the White House. I think it was last year. So one of the journalists asked that what role did the U.S. deep state had in Bangladesh, and President Trump was like, our deep state had no role. So basically, he did admit that there is a deep state. So yeah, that was a very, uh, good indication that that the deep state does exist, because a lot of people, they don't want to like believe that an American deep state exists. So yeah.
Oh, it does. It does everywhere, but the American one is a very powerful. But I think, Mr. If you in the beginning of his mandate, so it means we are, yeah, barely, 1.5 years ago. If you would go to Wikipedia and if you would ask for what is deep state, and they say, oh, that is an invention of Trump,
Yeah, yeah.
which is completely idiotic because he did not invent it, but he did use it several times. He used very often the expression. He does not use it any longer.
And my last question to you is, so this is also a very important one. So, Sheikh Hasina, she has already declared that she intends to return back to Bangladesh within the next 6 months. Do you believe there's a chance that she can receive some kind of a due process without mob interference and all that, and she can get some kind of a security in her home country? And also, my second part of the question is, so we have seen that Bangladeshis are increasingly getting frustrated over the last 2 years. They are regretting their decision over ousting Sheikh Hasina, because the economy is has been not doing well. Uh, Prices at the grocery stores are increasing. There are layoffs. People are losing their jobs, their livelihoods. The average rickshaw puller on the street, they cannot even make minimum wage. And I have seen videos where they were like, over the last 15 years, I made X amount of money per month, but now I cannot make anything. And so we miss her again. So do you think the power of the people can, counter geopolitics? Like, what's your
Yeah,
assessment?
I mean, there is no geopolitics in
Yeah.
that are only interest. It's not geopolitics; it's lobby, and that's money. Money in the pocket of some people, and ignorance. And so on. But I wouldn't call it geopolitics. There is no geopolitics because even from a geopolitical point of view, this is putting Bangladesh like a Pakistan is the biggest disservice to the United States you can imagine because it's putting it on its biggest challenger in China's hands. No, but of course that with the people in charge, it's impossible. Uh, but I agree with you. I think that sooner or later the Bangladeshi people will rebel against this dictatorship, not only because of the lack of freedom, but as you said, because they destroyed the economy. They
Yeah.
really made a terrible job everywhere, be it in health, as we've seen with the measles, as in the economy in general. And so this is a very likely scenario. And of course, I'm not sure if it's Sheikh Hasina, if it's not Sheikh Hasina, but you know, a true opposition has to come, and democracy and humanism is the only answer to the plights of the country. That's what I believe.
Do you believe the Awami League has a future in Bangladeshi politics again, over the course of time? What do you feel about that?
I think so. It's not only as a role, but there is no possibility of thinking of any difference without the Awami League. The Awami League is fundamental.
Okay. So yeah, I am concluding our podcast for today, and it was wonderful to have you over at my show, and I do really value your insights, and I learned a lot of questions that were unanswered, to be honest, and thank you very much for answering these.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It was really a pleasure. I really enjoyed very much this conversation. And let's hope Bangladesh will be free and will find democracy and human rights and as soon as possible. And that Sharia Kabir will survive and will
Sharia
be
Kabir,
free.
it's free.
I think about him every day.
Okay. Yeah, free Sharia Kabir and free all the persecuted journalists.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bye. Goodbye.
Bye bye.
We just had Paulo Casaca for an hour and 10 minutes, and this was a very, very insightful discussion. We discussed about you know Bangladesh after Sheikh Hasina, and also the role of the American deep state, and also the role of Muhammad Yunus, and also all the geopolitics that was involved towards the ouster of Sheikh Hasina. And uh, yeah, so it was a very insightful discussion, and hopefully I will try to bring another guest regarding the situation in Bangladesh. Please stay tuned. Thank you.